Hi, my name is Doug Schneider. Welcome back to Real Hi-Fi. Today I want to talk a little bit about whether vinyl sounds better than digital, but only a smidgen of that debate, because that debate could take 2, 3, 4, 5 videos because it's a wide-ranging topic. But I want to zero in on inexpensive vinyl playback and warn you that if you think you can get into vinyl cheaply and be happy, you're probably going to be disappointed. Why I think this is an important thing is because the vinyl resurgence, it's a real and big thing, and it's also a fun thing. The whole ritual around vinyl playback, the artwork itself on the large cover, the LP, feeling it, it's really fascinating, and it really brings a tangible experience to music listening. But the problem is many people get all excited about that and want to get into LPs, and they go buy a bunch of records, and then they play them on an inferior, and that usually means really inexpensive turntable, and it sounds like crap. And they're right, and they often go, this doesn't sound as good as my phone with earphones. What's the big deal? This doesn't sound any good at all. And putting aside the quality of the recordings themselves, because that has an enormous impact, obviously, on playback quality, the turntable itself has a huge impact on what you hear. Really huge. And that's because you're taking the mechanical movement of a stylus running through the grooves and translating that into electrical energy. And to do so, you need a high quality turntable, and that takes good parts, precision manufacturing, and proper setup. And most, if not all of those inexpensive turntables have none of that. Under $150, they're junk, plain and simply. It's only when you get up to a few $100s that you get a device that's, to me, acceptable. And then you have to go quite far beyond that to get a turntable that I think can match what digital playback, inexpensively, can do. But you might also be saying, well, isn't digital constrained by the same limitations? Not really. That's because digital playback has advanced immensely, such that even the converter in your phone is pretty good to play back digital music files. For $150, you can get a pretty good digital to analog converter, one that will compare to ones costing well past $1,000, whereas a $150 turntable, it's going to be a piece of junk. And that's because to build that turntable properly, like I said before, it needs parts, it needs precision, it needs setup, it needs a lot more material, and you can't do that cheaply. As a result, it costs quite a bit of money to produce a good turntable. And it's been my experience that the consumer needs to budget about $300 to get a turntable that is built reasonably well, functions well, and sounds acceptable. Now, it's still not going to sound as good as a good digital component at that price, but it'll sound acceptable. It can get you in the race and running. But it's also been my experience that the consumer needs to budget about $1,000, if not more, on a turntable to get something where it starts to approach what digital can do. And then you can start saying, well, which format sounds better, analog or digital? Below that, not so much. And before I go on, I want to stress one important thing. The difference I'm talking about here is not subtle. This isn't one of these audiophile things where, did I hear a difference? No. Inferior vinyl playback on crappy turntable sounds night and day worse than digital playback does. I'm not talking a subtle difference that you need audiophile ears for. That's why so many people getting into vinyl and then trying to do it inexpensively get so disillusioned, because they can hear it quite easily. One of the ways I like to demonstrate it is with Bruce Springsteen's Tunnel of Love. And if you don't know this album, it was released in 1987, and it's one of his best, if not his best. But why I like to use it is not just because it's musically very good, but because the LP pressing and the CD, which I've ripped files from, and that's what I use on my phone and on my music server, etc., on good playback systems, vinyl and digital, sound remarkably similar. Not identical, but very similar in terms of frequency range, tonality, detail. The vinyl will have a little more surface noise and maybe some other attributes. The digital might have a little more dynamic power, but they sound largely the same on good quality systems. Take note that I said good quality systems. I mean good quality playback systems, the digital converter or CD player, the turntable. But what happens when the quality of those systems is diminished? Well, on a very low price CD player or digital to analog converter, which I've played this through, it sounds largely the same. Like I said, those inexpensive digital components sound incredibly good, not just for the price. They compare to things much, much more expensive, but lower the quality of that turntable to something $300, and it doesn't sound nearly as good as what the digital can provide. And what do I mean by not nearly as good? The bass goes away, the highs aren't clear and refined, there's a grain over the mid-range. It doesn't even sound close to similar anymore. And that's really the thing, and why so many people get these LPs, put them on an inferior turntable, and go, wow, this doesn't sound any good, and they're not wrong. So how I came up with my own ideas about how much money you need to spend came through talking to other people, as well as largely my own experimentation, some of which I wrote about. Now, on SoundStageHiFi.com, I write a column called System 1, which focuses on less expensive audio equipment. And in there, I wrote about some inexpensive turntables. Now, some of them were priced in the hundreds of dollars, and they were quite good. But it wasn't until I got the Project X1 in, which at the time, September 2020 is when my write-up came out, was priced at about $1,000 US, that I kind of said, okay, this is the threshold. And why that was because when I put my LPs on that Project turntable and listened to them, that bass impact was there. The mid-range was much cleaner and smoother. The high-frequency, extension, detail, clarity was all there. It simply wasn't that way with the less expensive turntables. And when it came to Tunnel of Love in particular, I was actually astonished at how similar the two sounded, the digital playback and the vinyl playback. I'm not saying identical, but really similar, to the point you could start debating, hey, which one sounds better, digital or vinyl? And what I was really pleased to see was Tom Moon's review draft came in for the Project X1, which you'll see published on SoundStage Access on January 1st. He liked it as much as I did. And Tom reviews more budget turntables than I do, and many of them he finds, you can tell, acceptable, but they're not what he would buy. They don't really float his boat. But the X1, he raved about it. And you can see it in the words in his review. You can sense how he feels about it, that it's at that threshold that gives you really good vinyl playback. You're out of that budget realm. You're not as compromised anymore. And in case you're wondering why we would write about the X1 again, it was because Tom's review unit differed from mine. I got mine from Project's headquarters, which are in Austria, and they sell it globally, the X1, with the Pickett S2 moving magnet cartridge made for Project by Ortophone. Project is distributed in the United States, where Tom lives, by Sumiko, a cartridge manufacturer and distributor. So in the United States, Project turntables tend to be sold with Sumiko cartridges. So when you see the SoundStage Access review, it's the X1 with the Sumiko cartridge. I encourage you to read it. And by the way, the turntable now sells for $1,099 in the US. So say that threshold is still around $1,000 for really good vinyl playback. That said, the Project X1 isn't the only turntable around $1,000 to look at. Another one I want to mention is the VPI Cliffwood, also reviewed by Tom Moon on SoundStageAccess.com. In fact, it became one of our products of the year for 2021. Look for those products of the year on SoundStageHiFi.com. But know this, to get into that really good turntable realm, budget at least $1,000. So let me wrap this up by giving you the advice I think more people need to hear before they fall victim to the promises of vinyl. And that is, you can't do it on the cheap. If you're not willing to spend at least $300 on a turntable, don't even go there. Not only will you have lousy sound, you'll probably have a turntable that'll damage your records. And unless you're willing to spend at least $1,000 on a turntable, don't expect sound quality. that'll approach, let alone surpass digital. Thank you for watching.